What was it?
I got in the taxi yesterday. I split the suit. So I'm getting out this morning.
That's okay. I didn't come across it.
Coronial closed down. Please be seated.
So you're on that same comments from yesterday to tell the truth.
Yes, Your Honour.
Thank you. Constable Kirstenfeld, I want to take you back to the written document that you received from Sergeant Frost when you first got to the Yuendamu police station around 6:33 p.m. You gave evidence yesterday that your recollection today, sitting in the witness box, is that Sergeant Frost did give you some document, correct?
Yes, we received.
You believe it was an email from Sergeant Frost to Sergeant McCormack?
Yes.
That's what's in your mind now?
Yes.
You believe it was a single A4 piece of paper, correct?
Yeah, I think there was two. There was a map as well. I think she printed off some maps for everyone. I'm not sure if that was at the same time, but...
I'm going to suggest to you, I mean, you've given evidence yesterday, I think, accepting that your memory can be distorted over time.
Yes.
Particularly in stressful circumstances, I'm going to suggest.
Yes.
And particularly when you're asked to go over things many months later, correct?
Correct.
I'm just going to ask you then to think carefully about what I'm going to put to you to see if you agree that it's reasonable. Officer Donaldson has given evidence that when he got into the police station in Yuendamu before you, Sergeant Frost gave him the 3-page arrest plan that had been emailed to you and others earlier. You accept that?
Yes.
And we can see in the CCTV footage that when he leaves the station to go for a drive around the community, he has that document in his hand. When he comes back in, he doesn't have the plan. Secondly, Constable Rolfe has given evidence previously at trial that he photographed part of that 3-page arrest plan. And there are photographs of locations of interest from the plan on his phone. You accept that?
Yes.
Thirdly, you knew that Sergeant Frost's plan included an arrest after 5 a.m.
Yes.
Fourth, you knew that if Kumanjayi was arrested, the plan was for 2 officers to convey him back to Alice Springs and others to stay in the community in Yuendamu.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to have a look at a still which is taken from the CCTV footage after you arrive. Do you see there that we see from that still you have a document in your hand?
Yes.
Do you agree that that document is folded over at the corner?
Maybe. I can't really see.
Is it a bigger picture?
Do you want to see the whole of the footage around that time?
No, I agree that may be folded over.
I'm going to suggest to you that in those circumstances, putting all that information together, it is possible that you were actually provided by Sergeant Frost with the 3-page arrest plan. Do you accept that?
My recollection, pardon? My recollection of the event is that I have not seen that arrest plan. When I first saw that at the committal, it was a surprise to me.
Let me show you a page. This is Annexure C to the statement of Jodie Nobbs doesn't need to come on the screen. That is the email that Sergeant Frost sent to Superintendent, I would draw that, to McCormack. You see that? To Sergeant McCormack.
Yes.
It's one page with some instruction, but turn over the page. There's no map there, is there?
No, I think she printed out the maps separately. Not sure if that was then or if it was later.
I'll just ask the court officer, could you actually play that footage so we can see it, just in fairness? You see yourself on the screen there, Constable?
Yes. Constable, have a look at this one. It's clear, isn't it? You're loosely holding a document which is multiple pages, aren't you? I'm not sure if it's multiple pages or...
Well, it's not one page, is it?
I didn't see that from that, sorry.
Sorry, you couldn't see that?
No, I didn't see that from that, sorry.
I just want to put this to you in fairness because you need to understand what I'm going to submit to the coroner. I'm going to be submitting to Her Honour that it is evident from the bulk of the evidence available to her that you are likely to have had this plan that was printed out by Sergeant Frost and that you are misremembering that now.
I understand that. However, this is the document that I remember seeing.
The McCormack email.
This email.
I'm just going to show you two other documents for the benefit of my friends. One is the email that Sergeant Frost sent to Superintendent Nobbs, which sets out the written operations order. The other is the email sent by Sergeant Frost to yourself and others. Have a look at those two documents. Since Kumanjayi passed away, have you seen the email that Sergeant Frost sent to Superintendent Nobbs?
No, so which one's that, E or D?
Just have a look at them, you'll see for yourself in front of you. E was to everybody.
Oh, yep.
Do you see that the first page of those documents is almost identical?
Yes.
Is it possible that what you saw when you went out there was a multiple page document which was an email to Superintendent Nobbs?
No, I think this is the first time I've ever seen... Is this the same email, just to different people?
That's exactly right. You say you've never seen it?
No. Oh, sorry, well, at the committal, if that's the same email as that one, then...
Constable Kirstenfeld, I'm going to suggest that it is obvious that if Sergeant Frost gave Donaldson the 3-page arrest plan, and if Constable Rolfe had it at some point to take photographs from it, and if you're depicted there carrying a document that looks like it's folded over, it is likely that you were also given the 3-page arrest plan. Nobody else was given a single page email to Sergeant McCormack. Do you accept that it is possible that you were given the 3-page arrest plan?
Anything's possible. However, my recollection of the entire event is that this email, there was no real plan outlined on it. It's the Annex C is my recollection.
And that's the evidence you gave at trial.
Yes. And
are you reluctant to step away from that because that's the evidence you gave at trial?
No, because that is my memory. I'm not prepared to lie. I honestly believe this is the document that I saw, not this one. I'm happy to say anything's possible, but I'm not willing to lie.
But are you happy to reflect on the information I've given you about Donaldson having the document, Rolfe having the document, you knowing essential parts of the plan beyond 5 a.m, which is that if Kumanjayi was arrested, 2 people would stay in Yundamu, and that was in the plan. It just makes common sense, doesn't it? That you had that document.
So that was verbally spoken to us by Julie.
All right. Well, you understand what my submission will be?
Yes, I understand.
You gave evidence yesterday when I asked you about Sergeant Frost's memory that you were challenging her. You understand that's her evidence?
Yep, I remember that.
And that she found it difficult because she wanted you to wait till the others arrived and you were peppering her with questions, in effect.
Yep.
Do you accept that you might have done that?
I did ask her a lot of questions. I never had any intention to make her feel negative or anything like that.
You might have asked her some questions in a way that was quite demanding, can I put it that way?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
You're giving evidence today in the witness box in a very calm demeanour, and that's appreciated. But you're not always calm like that when you want some information to act quickly.
No one's always calm.
But if you went out to Yundamu and you believed that your mission there was to arrest Kumanjayi, correct?
Correct.
You wanted to get that done as quickly as possible, didn't you?
Usually you do want to get a job done quickly as possible.
And you were frustrated because there was a limited amount of information available. Is that fair?
I don't know if I was frustrated, but I was trying to find out information. I can't do my job without information.
You're certainly capable of asking things in a way which is demanding and challenging. Do you agree?
I'm capable of that, yes, but I had absolutely no intention of, if Julie Frost thought that I was rude to her or demanding or anything like that, that was never my intention.
But you can be rude and demanding in the workplace, can't you?
I generally try not to be, no.
Well, I'll just show you this snippet. We've got some information from an arrest of Antonio Woods, which I think you received some instruction, managerial guidance in relation to. On the 28th of June 2019, you and other officers were involved in the arrest of Antonio Woods. Do you recall that now?
The arrest of Antonio Woods?
Yes, he was an Indigenous male.
Yep.
Do you remember who the sergeant was there who was with you?
Sergeant Kirkby, I believe, was our patrol sergeant at the time.
Kirkby was somebody that you worked regularly with, correct?
Yes, he was on our patrol group.
Was it his responsibility to review any use of force, if there was some?
That's who I'd sent it to initially, yes.
At this point, as we see in this video that's available to everybody from the brief, Woods spoke over you while you were speaking to Sergeant Kirkby.
Yep,
do you recall that?
I remember this incident.
And do you remember that when he spoke over the top of you, you spoke to him in a way that was rude and aggressive?
I did, yes.
You accept that?
Yes.
Were you stressed at the time?
Yes, I just had quite a run and fallen over quite a few times. Yeah, the job can be stressful. Sometimes you get frustrated and yell.
Can you play that there?
Sergeant, this young gentleman, Anton Woods, he'd been run from the location.
So that was the name given, wasn't it?
It was. Is your name Constable Kirstenfeld? Are you talking to the sergeant? Then shut up! You interrupt me again, you're going in the back of the cage for interrupting me. Shut up! Sergeant, as I was saying, this is Anton Woods. He's run from the location. He's been apprehended. Is he good for anything?
Okay, you can stop that now. You see, we hear you there talking in two particular ways. Even to the sergeant, you are direct and quite loud. And then to Mr. Woods, you are outright rude and aggressive. Do you agree with that characterisation?
Yes, I do. That fell very short of how we should deal with people.
And you were given some guidance in relation to that, correct?
That's still ongoing.
So you accept, don't you, that in a workplace you can come across as challenging and demanding when you are stressed, correct?
I suppose.
And in this case with Sergeant Frost, when you were wanting information to her, it's possible, isn't it, that you spoke over the top of her and were demanding?
I don't recall that as being how it went at all.
Do you accept, given her evidence, as soon as she was interviewed, that you were challenging, that you might have come across in a way that interrupted her giving you information?
No.
You gave evidence yesterday that you're not sure in your mind now how the plan changed from the arrest at 5 a.m, which Sergeant Frost told you about, to let's go now to 577 and grab up Kumanjayi.
Yep, as I said yesterday, I've thought about that and I have no idea how that has occurred.
Officer Donaldson's given evidence in his first interview, 7-29, at page 6. It wasn't until 7 o'clock when I got a phone call from Kirstenfeld to tell me that they were here and they were going to go out and look for Kumanjayi. And then I came back and we had a quick briefing and then went out to search. Can I suggest to you that what is likely to have happened is that yourself and Constable Rolfe came up with a plan as to how to look for Kumanjayi as quickly as possible?
No.
Donaldson says, I went back. When I got there, everyone was already in the sort of middle of the station area, I suppose, and just looking at a map. Zach was giving a brief on where we were going to go. We were going to go look for him, look for Kumanjayi. Do you remember that?
Not really. I remember standing around the map, we were mucking about with radios.
Donaldson remembers that in the middle of the station, you were looking at a map and Zach was giving a brief on where you were going to go. Can you just not remember that?
No.
Do you accept that that happened, if Officer Donaldson recalls it?
If he's recalled that, then I can accept that that occurred.
The plan morphed from Sergeant Frost telling you it was 5 a.m. to going directly to collect Kumanjayi without any clear communication and dialogue with Sergeant Frost that the plan had changed. Do you agree with that?
No, Sergeant Frost was there at the station the entire time.
There was, when you got there, according to your evidence, when you were first interviewed, a plan which was communicated to you by Sergeant Frost to detain Kumanjayi at 5 a.m. You've given that evidence.
Yes.
Initially, it was just going to be an information gathering session with a plan on hitting the house with some intel about 5 a.m. in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. You recall that clearly.
Yes.
And then you just can't tell us how that changed to a plan to go straight to 577 and arrest Kumanjayi.
I have no idea. I've thought about it, and it's just not in my memory.
At some stage in the briefing with Sergeant Frost, you recall her saying something like, look, if you come across him, by all means, lock him up.
Yeah, I remember that. That was just as we were going out.
And you and Constable Rolfe took that information and changed it to going directly to House 577. That's what happened, isn't it?
No, we were going to House 577. So she knew we were going to House 577.
You were going to House 577 to look for Kumanjayi to arrest him, correct?
To find any information on where he was, and I believe that's when Julie said, if you come across him, arrest him.
And did you interpret that to mean that the 5 a.m. plan was abandoned?
I have no idea what I took it of.
Mustn't you? You and Constable Rolfe must have interpreted in your own mind what the next steps were as soon as you left the police station, correct?
Well, I knew we were going to House 577
To arrest Kumanjayi.
to find information on where he was, and if he was there, to arrest him. I don't know how we got to that.
We have information from Officer Donaldson, who's the next witness. I anticipate he'll give evidence that he was told by you that you were going to search the house to look for Kumanjayi. Well, I'll read it to you. I went back, this is for Officer Donaldson, I went back when I got there, everyone was in the middle of the station area, I suppose, and just looking at a map. Zach was giving a brief on where we were going to go. We were going to go look for him, look for Kumanjayi. I'm being shown by Mr. Coleridge that he gives evidence that he was told by you were going to go out and search for Kumanjayi when you called him on the telephone. Do you accept that?
I don't recall that. I remember calling him and asking him to come back to the station.
Do you accept that it's possible that what you actually said was, come back to the station, we're going to go search for Kumanjayi?
I have no idea. I remember being on the phone with him and calling him to come back. I don't really recall what was said on the phone.
You left the station, you yourself, carrying the beanbag shotgun, is that right?
Yes.
And also your Glock pistol?
Yes.
And your taser, OC spray and baton?
Correct.
Is that right? And you grabbed that shotgun because it was part of the beanbag shotgun, because it was part of your general kit for IRT, correct?
Correct.
What did you do with it?
I put it on in the back of the car.
So you could have it there ready if you needed it, is that right?
Correct.
Did you just grab it when you left the station because that's what you always do when you go into a community with IRT?
Generally, most police, even in metropolitan areas, are going to have either a shotgun or a police patrol rifle in the car.
You weren't advised that there was any general unrest, correct?
No.
There was no rioting?
No.
You were going out by the time you left the station to arrest one young male, Kumanjayi, correct?
That's what I thought our mission was.
And you left it in the car for that reason, is that right?
No, I'd taken it from Alice Springs. It's now my responsibility. It stays with me where I go.
Did you lock it in the car?
That vehicle doesn't have a lock. Not all the vehicles have locks. But
So
I'm
it's
sure,
just in the back
I'm sure
seat?
the car was locked.
I'm sorry.
The car was locked, but some vehicles have an actual extra locking
There
device.
was no gun safe in
There was
there.
no gun safe in that vehicle.
So it was on the back seat of the car, is that right?
Under the back well, I think, or the back seat, one of those.
If someone had smashed that window, they could have grabbed that shotgun, is that right?
I suppose they could have.
Did you talk to any of the other IRT officers about any weapons that they would carry?
No.
Did you speak to Officer Hawkins about him carrying the AR-15?
No.
I want to take you next to the House 577 and the search of that. I'll just read to you from your interview. You explained that you searched that house. You set it out clearly in your interview. I don't need to take you there. You then say, we came up with a similar plan of checking those houses and pulled up out the front. This is of House 511. Donaldson was out the side because he's got the dog. So if he runs out that way, we've got someone out that way. And the other guys came around the other side. I stayed. The corner between House 518 and 511 was out the back of that. It was a red house. And I was at the blue house, and two people came out the front there on mattresses. I asked if I could speak to them. They came over and were talking to me. They said they didn't know Kumanjayi Walker. I showed them a photo, and they said they hadn't seen that fella. At that stage, a lot of younger people, not children, but around about 18, 20, sort of started flocking to that area and building up around us. The house next door to 518, they started banging on the fence. I went over to see what was going on. It seemed like they were trying to get attention, warn people, that sort of thing. There seemed to be a lot of yelling going on and banging on the fences. That was before you heard the first gunshot, correct?
Yes.
It was obvious then to you that the presence of these new police was evident to the community.
I had no idea what the noise or commotion was about.
Just reflect on it now. There were community members there. There were lots of young people, 18 to 20. When they saw police, they started banging on the fences to attract the attention of the community.
Looking back at it now, I can see that is what was going on, but at the time, hearing noise, I had no idea what it was about.
Sure, I'm not asking you about the first gunshot. I'll come to that. The community were banging, it's evident to you, to warn anyone who was in the area that police were there, correct?
Now, reflecting back, yes.
And at that time, did you see Senior Constable Hawkins carrying the AR-15 in that area?
No.
So as far as you're aware, looking back, the community must have been banging just because it was obvious to them police were in the area.
It could have been anything.
Well, it stands to reason, doesn't it?
Looking back now, yes, but
Can I suggest
it could have been anything at the time. I went around to see what was going on.
Can I suggest to you, drawing on your experience as an officer, it's a good reason why a 5 a.m. arrest plan might be appropriate, where you don't have those crowds around who are going to get agitated by the sight of police.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to reflect on then your experience as an officer and assist us in terms of the lessons to be learnt from Kumanjayi's death. I'm going to suggest to you, officer, that it was, and I appreciate you're not the one who was in that house 5/11 when that tragedy occurred. It's predictable that Kumanjayi might arm himself with a weapon if he was cornered by police in a house.
As per the axe incident, it did seem that was a likely scenario.
And Constable Rolfe and Constable Ebel, when they entered House 511, were in a very confined space. Is that right?
I haven't seen the inside of that house, or
Neither officer knew Kumanjayi. Is that correct?
I don't think so, no.
Neither officer was able to immediately identify Kumanjayi, even though they'd seen the 6 November video. It was pretty dark lighting, wasn't it?
Like I said, I haven't really seen too much of it. I didn't go inside that house.
Okay. Just have a think about it now. I'm asking for your reflections on what might have been done differently in a way that would have minimised risk. You've agreed with me that it's predictable Kumanjayi might have armed himself with a weapon. You agree that house in itself is confined. Any house in community is, isn't it?
Most houses are.
And neither officer knew Kumanjayi, you understand that?
Yes.
And neither officer was able to immediately identify Kumanjayi in that house, agree?
Correct.
So Constable Rolfe had to put himself within about a metre, holding up a phone with his left hand against Kumanjayi's face for a while to try and identify him. Agree?
Yes.
You've seen the video.
Yes,
now.
I saw that at trial.
And that gave Kumanjayi the opportunity to grab a weapon when he was cornered like that, didn't it?
Yes.
And Kumanjayi then lashed out, and Constable Rolfe's given evidence he was stabbed in the shoulder. That is a failed arrest plan, isn't it?
Very much so, a young man died.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you
I said that very much failure, a young man died.
And I'm going to suggest to you, Constable Kirstenfeld, a better plan might have avoided that tragic result.
Yeah, better plan, better communication.
The lessons learnt, I'll just ask you, in your drawing on your experience, what do you think the lessons are from this?
I think we touched on quite a lot of those yesterday with clear who the team leader is, clear what the mission is, what the orders are, a clear and concise formalised plan delivered in an appropriate manner that everyone understands, and the leader of the plan or the leader of the mission understands that everyone understands.
And a risk assessment is part of that plan.
Definitely a risk assessment, yes, sorry.
And I think yesterday you said that formalised policies within the IRT to require those things would mean that you avoid the risk going into community.
It would help mitigate some risk. I don't know if it would avoid it entirely, but it would definitely head towards helping mitigate some of it.
Well, if the IRT had a policy that all missions required an operations order and everybody had to have a formal briefing on it, that would have helped enormously, wouldn't it?
Definitely.
Constable, on a different topic, it is clear from the materials that after Kumanjayi was shot, you ran to the house and you assisted in, when Kumanjayi was in the car, in terms of assessing what first aid you could give. A decision was made not to provide first aid at the scene, is that right?
I think that was already happening by the time I got there. I didn't run straight to them. When I heard shots fired, I ran to the car and grabbed the beanbag shotgun first and then ran over. And I think he was already in the process of exiting the house and going towards the car. I don't know.
Just help us I'll just read your evidence from the first interview and then I'm going to ask you to explain it to us because I know it's an issue that the family are very concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
You say at page 13, I don't think he had a shirt on. I'm not entirely sure. They were dragging him out here, which is initially where we were going to do treatment and all that sort of gear. But there were people everywhere. There were 1 million dogs around yapping and carrying on. And you've explained that a dog actually bit Adam Ebel.
Correct.
When you arrived, you could see your fellow officers dragging Kumanjayi, is that right?
There they were bringing him out of the house. I think he was in handcuffs from memory. Yeah, they were dragging him towards the vehicle.
Was there a discussion that you overheard about giving Kumanjayi first aid at the scene?
I don't recall.
Kumanjayi was put in the car. What was your role in the way to the police station?
I drove the other car. I saw there was a couple of body worns on the ground. I picked up a couple of those on the way, hopped back in my car and drove back to the police station.
Was anybody else in your car when you drove to the police station?
No, there were 2 officers in the back providing first aid to Kumanjayi and someone driving that vehicle. Adam Donaldson had his vehicle with the dog, and so I drove the other vehicle, drove back.
When you got to the police station, I'm not going to ask you to go through this in detail, and the family's lawyers may have specific questions that come to the family, but it's evident from looking at the material that the training in first aid you had in the military was of assistance here to you, is that right?
That's the same training that we have in the police for basic first aid stuff for that sort of injury. There was no advanced first aid training that could be applied, no trauma kits or anything like that were available. We were very limited in what we could do.
In terms of your training in the military, is it right to say that because of your experiences there, you were able to assess the seriousness of Kumanjayi's injury quickly?
I'm not really sure if it's to do with having been in the military, but
Will you start to talk about pneumothorax, for example, and is that training that you get in the police in the Northern Territory?
I don't know if that's on the first aid course. They change sort of every time you do them, but they do treat what's called a sucking chest wound, which is a penetrating wound to the upper lung area, and the treatment for it is the same in the first aid course as to what I received in the military for that training.
What did you understand to be the treatment for it, knowing that Kumanjayi had bullet wounds?
You put a cover over the wound to stop air from getting inside. It depends on what side or both sides as to whether or not you lay them on that side. He had both sides. He had injuries to both sides, so set him up a little bit more, sort of managing between keeping him comfortable as well as giving him the best treatment as you can, because if someone's not comfortable, they're going to move around.
And you want to try and stop them wriggling around, is that right? And
as best you can to be able to provide treatment, but you also need to make them comfortable so they don't panic and go into shock.
you want to try and keep them calm too, is that right?
As best you can.
Did you give any consideration to the idea of Kumanjayi's family coming into the police station, or one of them?
I didn't at the time, no.
Why not?
My focus was not on anything other than providing first aid to that man.
Who took the lead on first aid?
I don't think we had a lead first aid. It was initially we got him out of the car and we were going to start first aid there. The ground was hot and rocky and rubbly, so we moved him inside. I'm not sure if there was a lead first aid or anything like that.
I appreciate you and Constable Rolfe, we know from the CCTV footage of the police station, were trying to assist with first aid, is that right?
Correct.
And other officers as well, where they could?
Hawkins and Ebel did as well.
I'll leave it for the family's lawyers to ask you any specific questions about that, but do I understand your evidence that from the time Kumanjayi was brought into the police station when he was wounded to the time when tragically he passed away, you didn't turn your mind to the idea of a family member being brought in to comfort him?
No.
And just tell us again why that was.
My focus is the young man that's been hurt.
And in terms of keeping him calm, you didn't turn your attention to the idea of bringing a family member in to assist with that?
No, and does sound like a good idea though.
So in hindsight, do you think that would have been the right thing to do?
The right thing to do, yes, definitely.
Can I just ask, you said there were no trauma kits available. Did you think that there would be a trauma kit at the police station?
No, I didn't, Your Honour. In terms of a trauma kit, I mean something more advanced, something with instruments you could use to pierce a pneumothorax, or things for traumatic injuries and all that, things that the ambulance would have. You need specialist training to use all that sort of stuff. I believe our TRG tactical groups and all that have that sort of training. I think that should be something that especially police in remote areas should have training in and should have access to. But I didn't expect that we would have that sort of thing there, no, Your Honour.
And if it had been there, would you have been able to use it?
I do know how to use it. I haven't ever done it to anyone. I do know the process of how it works, and I would have given it a go, yes.
And where did you get the training for that?
From a medical course I did several years ago.
Whilst you've been in the police?
No, whilst I was a civilian, it was a medical training on treating severe injuries, blast, gunshot trauma and all that sort of thing, amputation, in order to keep someone alive long enough to get them to a hospital or treatment.
Constable Kirstenfeld, you left Alice Springs, I withdraw that, you left Yuendamu to return to Alice Springs on the Sunday, sometime after you were interviewed in Yuendamu, obviously.
Correct.
Constable Rolfe, we know, left either late Saturday night or early Sunday morning prior to you, is that right?
Correct.
Did you speak to Constable Rolfe about the events, about Kumanjayi's passing at any time prior to him leaving?
No.
Why was that?
Initially for the first lot there was obviously the treatment of Mr. Walker. I was doing a mix between being inside and patrolling outside with Felix. I think Rolf was on the phone for a fair bit of that.
You didn't say to him what happened?
No, I did not.
After your interview, did any, that is in Yuendamu, did any superior, anyone above your rank, tell you you shouldn't speak to Constable Rolfe or any of the other IRT members?
No.
Were you aware at the time that Kumanjayi died of a general order that related to deaths in custody?
No.
When you did your training in the police force, did you do any training at all or get any instruction on what to do if you were involved in a death in custody? That you can recall?
Not that I can really recall.
So is it right that you were not even aware of the existence of a general order that dealt with deaths in custody?
There's a general order for just about everything, so I would imagine, looking at that, there would have been a general order for it. It wasn't something I thought of at the time.
And no one brought it to your attention after Kumanjayi's passing?
No.
Did you think about in principle, the importance of separating witnesses so they don't contaminate each other's account?
Correct.
You would do that when you're investigating a job and you wanted people in a house party to give you a version of events, wouldn't you?
Correct.
So did you give any consideration to the fact that you should keep separate from other IRT members while an investigation was underway?
No, I gave my statement that night.
After you gave your statement, you understood, didn't you, that there would need to be further investigation in relation to this shooting?
Yes.
In your interview, your second interview, at page 50, so this is your interview still in November, the date is the 21st of November. You say, halfway down the page, you're asked a question by Officer Wilson. While we're on that, conversations afterwards, has he spoken to you about what occurred? He's referring to Constable Rolfe, of course. And you say, he went back on the night on that plane and landed at 11. I didn't go back until the next day, and then I went home and went to bed. So was that Sunday then, you ask? And you're told yes. And then you say, and then the Monday I gave him a couple of calls and said, are you all good? And he was talking to the lawyers and doing all these things with the lawyers and Sykes and all that sort of shit. And I was like, are we going back to work? And he's like, yeah, I think so. And pretty sure it was the Tuesday. No, it would have been the Monday night we got on the beers. Now, I appreciate you're talking informally there, but and I'm not being critical of that, but when you say you got on the beers with Constable Rolfe on the Monday night, what did you do?
Pretty much exactly that.
Whereabouts did you go and have some beers?
It was at Rolf's place.
How did that come about that you were at his place?
Someone sent a text message asking to come have beers.
Who was the person that sent a text message?
I have no idea.
When they sent a text message, did they say to have beers or to have a debrief or?
I think initially the text was something about a debrief, and I didn't know anything about it, and I asked about it, and then someone, I think it might have actually been Rolf, said it was code for beers. I was like, mate, cool.
Was it McCormack who suggested the debrief?
I don't think there was actually a debrief. Like I said, my interpretation of the term debrief was someone mucking about with the terminology of that just so that we could go and have some beers.
But in terms of when it was first suggested to you that there was a debrief, did you take that to be a proper debrief, a formal debrief?
Yes, I thought there was going to be a debrief.
And was that Sergeant McCormack who suggested that you have a debrief?
I have no idea.
I appreciate that was some time ago, but then you asked Constable Rolfe what's going on and he said debrief is code for beers.
Yes.
And then it turned out that the beers were at his place.
Yes.
Is that right? Do you recall what time roughly you arrived at?
No idea. Sometime in the evening, afternoon.
We've got some evidence as to some of the other officers who were there, and they include Constable Ebel and Hawkins were there for a short time. Do you recall that?
Yep.
Do you recall Brianna Boney being there?
Yep.
Do you recall Mitch Hansen?
Yep.
McCormack?
Yep.
Who else was there?
I think Sergeant Kelly came for a little bit. I think, don't swear me in on that. It would have pretty much just been anyone that was associated with our patrol group because we were the people that had that day off.
When you were there, do you recall a phone call being made by Constable Rolfe to Officer Kirkby?
No.
What about Sykes?
No, I don't think he was there, was he?
Do you recall any phone call being made to him and put on the speaker or anything like that?
No.
What discussion was there about what had happened in Yuendamu?
I don't think that we were sitting there discussing what happened at Yuendamu. I was drinking beers.
But Constable, it's perfectly obvious, isn't it, that if you didn't get a direction not to talk to Constable Rolfe and you'd already given your interview, so you thought you could speak about it, someone's going to say in front of you, or you're going to say, mate, what happened with that shooting?
If I'm not at work, I'm not talking about work. I don't one of the worst things about hanging out with cops is that they want to talk about work.
Well, it's the same deal with lawyers, I can assure you.
I prefer to put myself in situations and around people that don't talk about work. The crew I hang around now, my patrol group, if we're not at work, we are not talking about work. We're talking about fishing and things like that.
I totally accept that for normally, but this was an absolutely abnormal circumstance, wasn't it?
This was very different, yes.
It was shocking what happened in Yuendamu.
Yes,
And as you said earlier, a young man had lost his life.
he did.
Shot dead by a police officer, shot 3 times. That does not happen very often in the territory, thank goodness. You agree?
Yes.
And you were there to have beers, in part to comfort Constable Rolfe, is that right?
Yes, I suppose.
And in part to informally debrief about what had gone down.
Not really. My part of drinking beers was drinking beers.
Someone at some stage at the barbecue, I'm going to suggest to you, asked Rolfe what had happened.
Yes, I think some people were talking about it.
Who?
I couldn't. Like I said, I don't engage in conversation about work outside of work. I don't want to talk about work if I'm not at work.
Constable, I'm not asking you to dog on anybody, but I am asking you to give really frank evidence about what you heard and just cast your mind back, because I'm going to put to you a conversation that somebody else says happened. What did you hear being discussed?
I don't know. I remember there was someone talking about the incident. I think someone told them to be quiet about it. I remember sending Rolf a text message, even though he was in the same room as me. Sending him a text message. Don't talk about it. Lawyer, as in just deal with your lawyer. Do not talk about anything. And I think that was the end of it. And then it was just the night talking about, how much money I can spend on my four-wheel drive. And
I'm going to read to you what Bree Boney says happened. She says there was no real specific discussion specifically about the Yundamu incident. I don't recall the specific conversation. I guess the context of some of the conversation, not all of it, we were there for a few hours. Part of the conversation, the context would have been use of force, the training that we all receive in terms of use of force. Do you recall that?
no.
She says that some of the discussion was similar incidents that we've had in the past, and we were all having that conversation under the premise that Zach, on the face of it, had adhered to our training. The edged weapon equals gun, and we all thought he'd be back at work within the week. Do you recall that being said?
No.
You accept that it was said, given that that's Officer
Yeah.
Boney's recollection,
Yep.
and that was totally inappropriate to be speaking at a session with beers in front of Constable Rolfe about the fact that what he'd done was in line with his training, an edged weapon equals gun. You agree that was completely inappropriate, wasn't it?
Yeah, like I said, my involvement in the barbecue and drinking or any of that sort of conversation was to a text to Rolf saying not to talk and to just deal with your lawyer, and then drinking beers.
Just reflect on your role as a police officer, though, in terms of what actually went down there. Having that conversation in front of Rolf wasn't you, I appreciate it, but the fact that that conversation occurred had the real possibility of contaminating a witness's evidence.
Possibly.
I'm going to read you that message that you just referred to. We've got these messages in the brief of evidence, Constable. On the 11th of November, so this is the Sunday night at the Monday night, at 6:07:58, you sent a message to Constable Rolfe, even though you're in the same room, and it says this: "Stop talking to these cunts. Lawyer, lawyer, lawyer. They are covering their own arse." And you go on to say at 6:08, "You left and didn't get to see the aftermath of the arse covering. Stop talking to them. They are fucking covering their own arse." What did you mean by that?
I have no idea about that second one. No, I have no idea.
Do you want to have a look at the text messages?
I'll believe you.
Who was covering their own arse?
I have no idea.
Can you offer up a suggestion as to what you meant?
I don't know who was saying what at that stage.
Somebody must have been saying something in your earshot for you to give Constable Rolfe that warning. Do you agree?
I agree, yes.
And you didn't want that somebody to know that you were messaging Rolf?
I suppose.
Does it suggest that maybe it was someone senior to you?
Everyone was senior to me, Your Honour.
Rolfe replies to you at 6:09 and he says, "Got it, bro." And you reply at 6:10, "Don't trust these snake fucks." And then at 6:21, "Lawyer told you not to comment." And at 6:22, if you check... I won't read that one. Lawyer...
I know what that one says.
Okay. Lawyer told, and just so everybody's listening, it's a remark that's not relevant to this conversation. So don't trust these snake fucks. Lawyer told you not to comment. Who were the snake fucks not to trust?
I have no idea who I'd be referring to, but I don't know.
Who was the lawyer who told you not, or who was the lawyer you're referring to there?
Whoever Constable Rolf's lawyer was at the time.
So you knew that Constable Rolf's lawyer had told him not to comment?
I'd assume that would be the case.
Well, it must be, because you just wrote to him. Lawyer told you not to comment.
That's what lawyers always say.
What did the lawyer told him not to comment to who?
I have no idea.
These are very significant events for you, Constable Kirstenfeld, and you need to make sure that you're acquitting yourself as best as possible in the witness box, because it's your credibility. You understand that?
I do understand that.
Just think about it now. Lawyer told you not to comment. What had the lawyer told? What had you been told by Constable Rolfe?
I'd imagine that he'd said that he'd spoke to a lawyer and that his lawyer said not to talk to people, not to comment on it.
Who was covering their own arse?
I have no idea. My sentiment of this was, being of the lowest rank at the whole incident and all that, is the old expression of it rolls downhill, that it's probably going to be, all the people of lower ranks getting thrown under the bus. So I think there was a bit of a sentiment of that was going to occur. I don't know who I'm referring to in this. Like I said, I was drinking beers.
Was it somebody more senior to you who was talking about what Brianna Boney told us was edged weapon equals gun?
Like I said, everyone was senior to me. I was the new person on the patrol group. Oh, sorry, I think another squad had come in, but I was everyone there was more senior to me.
That conversation that Brie Boney's talking about occurred in the presence of sergeants, didn't it?
I don't know. We weren't always all together in the same room. There was outside, inside.
Her Honour asked you a question about why you texted, effectively. You were texting Constable Rolfe because you wanted to say something to him that you didn't want the others to hear?
I'd imagine so.
Must be. You'd agree.
Must be.
Did you think at the time, if the lawyers told Constable Rolfe not to say anything, not to comment, it's totally inappropriate that he's sitting here having beers where there are sergeants and other officers talking about what happened?
In hindsight,
Or had the real potential to contaminate any evidence that he might give later on in any forum. Do you agree?
in hindsight, yes, that does seem the case. My focus on what was going to happen and what was going on was drinking beers.
All right. And your focus in terms of sending him the text was concern for him and concern for other officers who were there on the ground in Yuendamu. Is that right?
I think so.
In page 50 of that second interview, when you explain about Monday night we got on the beers, you say, just with the boys, but you know what the town's like, there's lefties everywhere looking over your shoulder, so you can't really talk shop or anything like that. What do you mean by that?
I said police officers love to talk about work, and it's not very good to be sitting around drinking in town if people are talking about work or mentioning jobs or anyone or anything like that.
In front of the lefties. Who did you think the lefties were?
Referring to like hippie type people.
Referring to people who might be questioning why a young man was shot in a community?
No, more we tend to get attacked a lot by out on the town by people that have a very anti-police sentiment.
Let me just read these two paragraphs together to you at page 50. You say, I gave him a couple of calls and said, are you all good? This is on the Monday. He was talking to lawyers and doing all these things with lawyers and psychs and all that sort of shit. It was during one of those conversations when you were talking to Rolf, he must have said to you, look, I've been told not to say anything, not to make any comment about what happened. Do you agree?
Sorry,
You put put this together with the text that you sent him that night.
Yep.
Where you say, lawyers, talk to your lawyers, don't say anything, watch your back, these other people are snakes. Rolf must have told you in one of these phone calls that he'd been told not to say anything.
yes. Sorry.
And then you say, we were going back to work and I was like, are we going back to work? And he's like, yeah, I think so. I'm pretty sure it was Tuesday. No, it would have been the Monday. We got on the beers, just with the boys. But you know what the town's like. There's lefties everywhere looking over your shoulder, so you can't really talk shop or anything like that. Doesn't that suggest that, in fact, you went to Constable Rolf's place for some beers so you could talk about what happened? You could talk shop.
I can see how that's interpreted that way. That's not the way it's intended.
Wednesday you went to work that night. You found out that 5 detectives had gone in and arrested Constable Rolf in front of his mum there in Darwin. And you say, I haven't spoken to him since. I was aware of his bail conditions because the lawyer that did his bail is my lawyer. So he rang me up and told me that I couldn't have any contact with Zach.
Correct.
Did you have the same officer, I withdraw that, did you have the same lawyer as Zach had at that time?
No.
At what point in time were you told by a lawyer that you couldn't have any contact with Zach?
The night that he was arrested, my lawyer rang me up and said that Rolf had just been arrested and that he was trying to organise bail because his lawyer was unavailable at the time of the arrest, and that one of his conditions is going to be that we have no contact with him. And am I able to adhere to that? I said yes. What do I do? He said, most likely expect to be arrested yourself and just wait at home for that to occur.
There was never any suggestion of you being arrested in relation to anything that happened with Kumanjayi, though, was there? But from anybody else other than that lawyer you spoke to?
I have no idea. I sat at home for a month waiting for that to occur. Or to hear from it, or to be told no, or anything.
In relation to Constable Rolf, initially he had assumed that, in terms of his conversations with you, that he'd be back to work straight away, is that right?
I thought we were all going back to work straight away.
So it came as a shock to you that an officer had been charged with a criminal offence in relation to what had occurred?
I thought so.
You understand, don't you, that when a police officer is given a gun, that comes with a huge responsibility?
Yes, I do.
And that when that gun is discharged, wounding somebody, an officer needs to be accountable for the use of force?
Yes.
Do you resent the fact that an officer has to be accountable for the use of force?
Not at all.
I asked you yesterday about whether or not you had heard any negative attitudes expressed towards community police. Do you recall those questions?
Yep.
And you said that you hadn't heard anybody express negative views, is that right?
Not to my knowledge.
What about after Kumanjayi died? Did you hear any officers express negative views?
Like I said, shortly after that occurred, I was at home. I was at home for almost a month.
At some point you were critical, weren't you, at that time, around that time, as to what had happened on the 6th of November with Lanyon Smith?
No.
And Chris Hand. Before the 9th of November, were you critical in front of anybody else about the way that Chris Hand and Lanyon Smith had handled?
I'd highly doubt that. I don't comment on other people's jobs. I wasn't there.
Do you know Leilani Weathers, police officer?
I do.
She's given evidence of a conversation that she had with you after Kumanjayi passed away, where you were criticising the way that Hand and Smith dealt with the 6th of November. She's given evidence that, we've got some evidence that she was talking about, you were talking about Hand and Smith in a way that was not positive, referring to them as cowboys. That they should have used more force against Kumanjayi. They should have shot him on the 6th. Words to that effect.
I doubt that very highly that I would have said that. I don't think that in that situation that they were in, that's...
Are you critical in any way of the way that Hand and Smith dealt with the 6th of November?
Like I said, I wasn't there. I didn't feel what they felt. I didn't see what they saw. It wasn't my job. It's not my place to comment about other people's jobs or how they do them. I'm not in that position. I don't go around talking poorly of other people as best I can, especially behind someone's back. I don't like to, if I wanted to say something negative about either of those two, I'll say it to their face.
See, Chris Hand sends an email to Assistant Commissioner Wurst after the 6th of November before Kumanjayi passes away, where Assistant Commissioner Wurst asks him how he is, and Chris Hand says words to the effect of, from my perspective, it was a good day, nobody got hurt. Kumanjayi didn't get hurt, police didn't get hurt, that was a good outcome.
Yep.
It's a much better outcome than anybody being shot in or hurt in those circumstances. Do you agree?
100%.
But you were willing to refer to other police as snakes in your text message.
Not sure who I was referring to in that one, Your Honour.
Well, there were only police there.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm not sure who I would have been referring to.
I'm going to ask you some questions about the culture of the IRT in Alice Springs, and I'll finish on this. You've heard in this inquest evidence being called about a number of text messages which are very disturbing. Do you agree?
Yes.
Included in those text messages are messages from Sergeant Bowens to and from Constable Rolfe about bush cops. Just have a read of page 4, if you will. See, Constable Rolfe, in his text messages to Sergeant Bowens, says things like the bush cops wouldn't have been able to get him when he's talking about running after someone. So it was good we went, the bush cops fucked up as usual. The bush cops blow my mind. I'll tell you about these dudes when I see you. What do you think about that in terms of an exchange of views between Constable Rolfe, who you know, and Sergeant Bowens, who was the leader of the IRT?
They never spoke with me like that. I don't know how to comment on this.
It's completely unprofessional, isn't it, for them to be referring to fellow police officers in community as hopeless or lazy or fucking up?
Yes.
And it's a lack of leadership from Sergeant Bowens, who is your sergeant in the IRT, to be speaking to Constable Rolfe like that?
I agree.
Included in these text messages are a number of racist remarks. I'm not suggesting that you sent or received a racist text message, but please have a look at them so I don't have to read those words out again.
Thank you. Which page?
Page 4, you'll see third line up.
Oh, yep.
Page 5. From Mitch Hansen, member of your patrol group, to Constable Rolfe.
Yep.
Disgraceful and racist, do you agree?
Yes.
Have you ever heard those terms being used by members of the police force in Alice Springs?
No, I haven't.
Have you heard members of the IRT use those terms about Aboriginal people?
No.
Do you agree that those terms are dehumanising?
I think I'm not really sure what
All right.
that
Let me
means.
just stick with racist.
Yes.
Do you understand that the use of racist language can be dehumanising,
I understand. Yep, I get you now. Yep, I agree.
and that using that language has a negative impact on the culture of a team in the police?
It could do, yes.
Your Honour, I only just have one more topic, and it would be appropriate if we deal with that just while the live stream is off briefly.
All right. So we'll have just that topic and then we'll break for morning tea.
Thank you, Your Honour.
All right, but we'll cut the live stream now, and this is to do with a non-publication order that
It
is
is.
currently in force.